This is Dr. John Grazel, and it's a unique first video that attempts to do a synopsis in connection with the partnership we have with others on the crossroads of peace site. And particularly the videos we present around the Baha'i Chair-sponsored dialogue on human security. That dialogue was not just a gathering of people. It was built upon two clear ideas. One, a Baha'i idea, which is the idea of consultation, which is that when you get together, it's not just a presentation of different ideas for the audience to then consider and weigh, but rather an attempt to reach a consensus of common ownership and understanding through built upon individual inputs from individual perspectives and experience. And the second was something called Bohmian dialogue, named after David Bohm, famous physicist, who developed in his mind the idea of dialogue as not, again, just an exchange of ideas, but actually a transformation of one's own mentality and understanding in the process of exchanging ideas with another. So rather than convincing the other, actually changing oneself. Now, I hope you will look at our dialogues, and if you do, I think this is just quickly what you'll get to see. We had four very unique individuals that we brought together because of their worldly experience. Dr. Patrick Cronin, with immense experience from the official security perspective of the Defense University and positions in USAID and various other very distinguished organizations. Dr. Kishan Manocha, who is a lawyer and a psychiatrist and has worked with in terms of war crimes in Africa. Ishkat al-Moumin, who was the first woman minister and minister of environment of the government of Iraq after the U.S. Intervention in Iraq, and therefore brings that experience of a struggling administrative bureaucrat under a very demanding situation. And Constance Newman, who Assistant Secretary of State, a Deputy Administrator in AID for Africa, a woman of enormous experience, personal management in working with people and working with people around the world. Now, when those people came together, they all had strengths and they all recognized each other's strengths. But it's interesting to see how they came together. They began very much in sharing with us the experiences they brought on the question of human security and how, I mean, human security, it begins with our own security needs as people, but actually emerging as a developmental paradigm after the end of the Cold War, championed by Japan and Canada in particular. And in their initial explanations, they sort of stress the classic things one considers in terms of people's basic needs of housing, food, water, protection of physical being and community, the things that are sort of the standard human security elements under the official doctrine. They also looked at the reality of why the United States has not bought into that doctrine, and already began to come together with a very interesting observation that there's a bit of a conundrum in that it's the United States' own search for national security that is a cause of insecurity to other countries in the world as it tends to take actions to protect itself. Now, this isn't distinctive only to the United States, but the United States is particularly in the forefront because of its power positions and present situations, particularly in the war on terror. What they do come to express is that need for human security can no longer be answered, though, by any particular nation. It seems to require global actions. We are faced with global circumstances. We require global coordination and harmonization. And it's not just a matter of operations, but it seems to require the beginning of the acceptance of a global ethic about human security and various efforts, things that have not been normally in the domain of classic diplomacy, which focuses on interest and negotiation and not necessarily try to really get to the underlying principles and premises of each of the parties. Having done that, they then share their own experiences, and their own experiences show how, even as we try to evolve a global ethic, we have to get a more local reality involved. That the global ethic comes out of the experiences of people within their local environment and has to be expressed and felt by them in their local environment. That is how they come to believe it, and that is their way they can practice it. Now, one of the things that were pointed out is a major change has been the degree to which local people not only can do this, but can share it with others, and not only within their community, but around the world. And this is very much tied to modern communication technology, to Twitter, to Facebook, to cell phones and that, which can create new ways of quickly forming local networks and also global networks around particular local situations and local interests. And where we begin to see this very interesting coming together of ideas from these separate individuals is how their discussions more and more point out that we have to move from security as a national issue to security as a personal interest. Now, human security as a doctrine particularly puts forward the need of personal security. But what they more and more show is that it's individuals who have to actually advance this doctrine. And a particularly dramatic example of that is the discussion around Rwanda and the discussion around Romeo Dallaire, who led the UN forces in Rwanda, and his experience and some of his cohorts as individuals trying to protect and put forward a doctrine of human security in their actions that was not supported by the official United Nations structure, because it was not supported by key nation states that were behind that. That brings the discussants very interestingly to the idea that eventually, if we want to change the way these nations act, then it's the individuals, we ourselves, who have to change the way our nations look at it and how our nations express it, working together within a local context. And that gets to who we see ourselves as and what makes us become such champions of that. And what's very interesting in the dialogue is how these different individuals, in the end, bring us to a meaningful introspection from their own lives and thoughts of how that has to occur. And in some cases, it's interesting because they don't fit the stereotype you would think. So Dr. Kishan Minocha, the psychiatrist, ultimately becomes, in some ways, the most strong proponent of take action and stop worrying about what's going on in your head. Dr. Newman really gets back down to the fact that it's about very much family and how not only we act, but how we raise the next generations and how we see ourselves as part of a larger generational process. Dr. Cronin very much calls upon the larger traditions of values that come from history and from people and even families within histories and institutions with histories, and rediscovering and carrying forth those deep values. And Mishkat al-Moumin, the administrative bureaucrat, very much becomes the champion of the people themselves and how ultimately how they experience it. If we put those all together, we then can begin to build a world of human security for individuals within the world, protected through their nation states, states that are empowered and capable because they are working together on a global effort, but still ultimately coming back to the fact that it rests on individuals and the commitment of individuals to those foundational principles, not only of their own security, but about being agents of security for others, and by taking immediate actions in their immediate circumstances to make that happen. So go to the Crossroads of Peace website, and under the Dialogue and Consultations look at that dialogue, study it, and study it not only for its substantive matter on human security, but also on the process of dialogue as understood by both Bohemian dialogue and the Baha'i concept of consultation.